Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. Today it's all about Game Master preparation and we're looking at monsters. We always talk about monsters at some point. In fact, we talk about monsters on this channel rather a lot. It's one of my favorite topics and probably will continue to be one of my favorite topics. Today I'm going to be putting up a poll, so feel free to take part in that poll. I am going to be presenting something slightly different to what I normally do. It is a little bit different. I have front loaded it and I suggest grabbing some food and drink and I'll get started in a second, provided I can not stop choking on myself. These things happen. So yes, we're going to do this. Be an interesting process. I honestly I'm looking forward to this. So now that that's been out of that, we've got that out of the way, I'm ready to go. Everything seems to be working fine. Hopefully my throat and my mouth as well. We'll see how we go. Anyway, let's go. Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about creating or making or crafting scary monsters. How do you make a monster scary? And there's a couple of different ways you can go about doing this. But ultimately, it's the same formula for pretty much everything. And it's not that hard to figure out. It really isn't. So when it comes to what makes a monster scary, so when you're making and creating your monsters, these are the things you want to consider. The first off is the appearance of your monster. Sometimes not showing the monster is one of the scariest things you can do. But when you finally do show the monster, because this is a trick, you build up tension because you don't know what it is. You create the image in your mind as a player. So in your role-playing games, they're creating that image by not showing the monster. When you do finally show that monster, if it doesn't have biology that works in a way that you're used to, that is terrifying. You can go with the easy route and just give it big teeth, lots of claws and tentacles. That can certainly help. Absolutely, I agree. But by changing the way the biology of a creature would normally look, whether that doesn't have eyes, or doesn't have a mouth, or doesn't have legs, doesn't have an arm, just changing things a lot in terms of biology really does help. Make it look freaky. Then it's the special ability or feature for your monster in your game. If your monster breaks the laws of physics that you know and that are known, then that can be terrifying. What it eats quite often is a really good way of communicating a monster being scary, is what it eats, particularly if it's meat or blood, because that probably means it will eat you, right? Now, whether that's through their mouth or through a probe or some other diabolical means that you've cooked up, that's terrifying. Teeth, painful, particularly if you're still alive. Probe, still terrifying, maybe not quite so painful, but still, if you think about it, a mosquito, if you take a mosquito, which we're really not that afraid of, it's a nuisance, but if you were to expand it in size and it's pushing a probe into you and sucking your blood out, that's a pretty terrifying creature. Yeah? No desire to communicate with you. In other words, you can't communicate either through body language or sounds or whistles. It has no desire. Even if it does have a way of communicating, it has no desire to communicate with you whatsoever. You just don't come up as being something it wants to communicate with. That is terrifying. Being able to see in the dark when you can't see in the dark. This is one of the reasons why making a game that has playable species and races that can see in the dark is a terrible idea, because it takes away that fear that it can see in the dark. It can see you, but you can't see it. That's an important aspect to creating a monster. It goes right back to our childhood when we were terrified of the dark. Heck, we might still be afraid of the dark. And another aspect to a monster that makes it terrifying and scary is there's only one of these monsters, because it's so old or so powerful that it has destroyed everything else that's like it. Or it doesn't even need to breed. It sort of indicates to you that it may be almost indestructible. So that there being only one This is not like a species that breeds and has eggs and has cute little babies or anything like that. None of that's going on. That is a terrifying concept, honestly. Okay, so that is how I would suggest going about making a scary monster, but there's some tools for making and creating and building your own monsters that I like to go over, and I want to go over them again, just to reiterate where they are and what they are. If you're making a monster stat block, we'll start there with just a stat block. Pathfinder 2nd edition has the PF2E monster tool, and it will build a stat block for Pathfinder 2nd edition or remastered. You can use the Call of Cthulhu creature creator. The Call of Cthulhu creature generator. This actually makes monsters for Call of Cthulhu. If you're playing Starfinder, the Starfinder monster builder is actually out there on the internet. You can use it. D&D 5e stat block builder, obviously, and of course there's D&D Beyond. But there are lots of third-party builders that you can use. There's Glyphs Monster Maker will make stat blocks for 5e. There's the Monster Shuffler. But also, if you're not dealing with 5e and you're playing it's like an older version of Dungeons and Dragons, or you're playing a completely different system, ChatGPT, quite often, if there's enough resources on the internet, it can probably build a stat block for you. It won't be very good. I've always found that ChatGPT, even version 4, is not as good as just doing it yourself. But it'll do part of the work for you. At least that's something, right? Now, inspiration for your monster creation. Brainstorming on a page of paper with pen or pencil. This is where you draw like a quick sketch. Could be just really simple, doesn't need to be fancy. It can look like a 5-year-old has drawn it. It's all right. And you write some key words around there to link to that image that you're using. This is a good way, even if it looks really rough, of starting the brainstorming process for creating your monster. Looking at books and movies and video games and music for your inspiration and ideas. You're taking pieces from here, there, and everywhere. Google search, your Pinterest artwork, ArtStation, DeviantArt websites. All of these are really good for pulling together concepts. You can take pieces, you can take a piece of art that you've never really seen before. But there's another way of doing this, and this is very much the AD&D approach. Whatever version of AD&D you're looking at, whether it be first edition Monster Manual, or you're looking at, say, the second edition Monster Manual or the Monstrous Manual. And that is, you combined real-world animals or fantasy creatures and you create a new thing. This is a really clever way of coming up with something that is unusual, odd, and breaks the biology that you're used to, that I was talking about. You can have generation tables, like random generation tables for creating your monsters. Whether you believe it or not, it is possible to do this. And they have different aspects to your monster. I know they exist because I built them. And there are other people out there who have built similar sorts of things. I think mine are probably more extensive, and I will provide you with a link to them if you're interested. The other thing is the monster building process. I talked about getting ideas and inspiration and sort of the brainstorming process, but you need to have a monster concept. It could be any part of the monster, could be a concept, but you need a starting point. So figure out what that is. Whether it's starting with a picture, whether it's starting with a special ability, whether it's starting with a way that it communicates, whether it's starting with a way that it consumes something or feeds. All of these things are important. Even if it's starting with a motivation. Now, why is the monster operating in the world the way it does? Describe the monster's appearance. You can describe it, you can select an image, you can draw a picture, you can get your children to draw the monster for you. You can use software like Midjourney, artificial intelligence. All of these things will help. Starry AI, I think Stable Diffusion is probably one of the better ones, but you kind of have to download that and there's some layered software involved. You can develop some special abilities for your monster. Where do you get these ideas from? They can come from existing monsters, but you can also use tables. You can use ideas from all the things I just talked about, movies, books, magazines, all that sort of stuff. Give the monster a name that matches the monster concept in some way. This can be quite difficult sometimes, but that's an important aspect to it. Make up a story for your monster. All monsters need to have a story, because whether you realize it or not, quite often the best stories are monsters that have their own story as well. And then your players are interacting with the monster, so you're creating a new story, which is basically their adventure with the monster. Give it a history. If there's a history to be put together, create something. Ecology, habitat, combat tactics, how does it fight, its motive, the lore for your monster is really important. It is more important to come up with these ideas than the stat block. The stat block is much easier to build when you have monster lore, when you have the narrative of your monster. Build the monster stat block and do all the mathematics. This is the last thing I would suggest you do. Don't chase that mathematical unicorn where you're trying to make the perfect monster stat block creation. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be good enough and follow the basic rules of the system you're working with. The next thing, and these are a series of questions. It's all very well saying, okay, what's the monster story? Well, how do I build the monster story? So there are a series of questions you can ask yourself. And one of the best places to go when asking about story is A.J. Pickett. So these questions are from A.J. Pickett. A few of you may be aware that I know him reasonably well. And so these are the questions that I think you should look at and the ones that he recommended, plus also William, you won't know who William is, but that doesn't matter. Where does this monster normally live? What is the normal environment for your monster? Why is the monster currently in the location for the adventure if it's not its normal living environment? There's got to be a reason why, okay? What does the monster want? Or what does the monster want from the characters? Okay? Those are the things you need to ask yourself. What makes the monster unique? What makes it different from something else? What makes your monster scary if it is meant to be scary? So I have just highlighted those aspects right at the very beginning. And you can possibly combine lots of different ideas to get there, okay? Don't just use one thing. What does this thing feed on? What is the monster feeding on? Or how does it survive in its environment? And then what is the monster's territorial range? So if it has a lair or a home, what's its range? How far does it venture to find food or just live? Like there's a territorial range to every creature and animal, and monsters would be the same. Does it have any territorial range? Does it just go wherever it wants until it's eaten everything in that location and moves on to a new food source? This tends to what this happens with animals as well. What does the monster sense? So how does the monster and what does the monster sense in terms of creatures and prey in its environment? So, and what does it ignore? Are there things that it will ignore completely because it doesn't see them as being important? So you need to decide how those senses work. How does the monster communicate? Is it clicks and whistles? Is it through odor? Is it through body language? Does it talk and have a language? And then, of course, how does your monster reproduce? If it even does, it may not reproduce. It may be one of a kind. So how does this monster ultimately change the environment it is currently living in? Okay? Because all animals, creatures, humans, and fantasy creatures, but monsters as well, will change their environment. They have an effect on the environment. These are all the questions you can ask yourself. Now, I'm not suggesting you try to answer all these questions, but you can answer pretty much all of these if you really want to. And that will really help build out that monster. Monster design and creation. There's a couple of ways of thinking about how to go about doing this, and I've kind of highlighted some of this. But now we need to start looking more in line with the mathematics and the stat block for your monster. And there's a process to this. So you select what difficulty you want your monster to be. Is it a low-level monster, a mid-range monster? Is it a high-level monster? Is it very powerful? Is it weak? What is the role of your monster when it comes to a battle? Okay? Is it on its own? Is it a solo monster or a legendary creature? Is it a leader of other monsters or other creatures? Is it a soldier, fights in the front line? Is it artillery? Does it fight at a distance? Is it a controller? Does it control the environment? Or is it a skirmisher? Does it jump in and out of battles? Select your ability or attribute scores for your monster that make sense for it. Okay? How long the monster will survive and how much health it has, your hit points or health points or wounds or whatever the heck it is. This is just a timer to determine how long it will stay in a fight. So you figure out what your timer wants to be, and that's how many hit points you need for whatever level that monster has been created for. Assign your monster features. So when I say monster features and traits, these are things that are always in effect. So your monster have wings, it always flies. If it has a fin and it lives in the water, it always swims. Those are traits, okay, and features. Then you create your special powers and abilities. These are things the monster actually has to consciously do. And usually in a game system, it will revolve around using an action, whatever that might be, okay? So maybe it's a basilisk and it's got an ability to stare at something, but it has to turn it on. Or maybe it's got the ability to cast spells. Well, that's going to require its action, and it's a special power or ability. It has to actually decide to do that. Okay, so those are what I mean by special powers and abilities. What sort of attacks does the monster make in your game? What sort of mechanics? Does it have a bite, a claw, a tentacle? Does it have something else? Does it shoot out darts? Like what sort of attacks does it do? This is different to the special powers and abilities to a certain degree. These are the things that generally it can do all the time, whereas special powers quite often are things that are limited. Okay. Next is building your monster's special abilities and attacks. How to go about doing that is different for every system. My advice to you is that be careful about focusing on the mathematics of your monster too much. Try to keep it fairly standard for whatever system you're using, okay? Build within those parameters. Make your mathematical adjustments for the stat block for your monster. Do that near the end to get the broad strokes sorted out first, okay? And then check the monster stat block mathematics at the end. This is the last thing you do. There's a couple of ways you can do this. If you're doing, dealing with 5e, for example, you can check your monster's mathematics with something like 5e tools, the CR calculator on a website. It's called 5e tools. You go and find the CR calculator to figure out if you've built it correctly. I'm going to warn you, though, about 5e tools and that CR calculator and any tool that like this. If you're dealing with 5e, unfortunately, those tools are probably going to be wrong. The change in the maths around 5e monsters as it is. But if you're dealing with something like Shadow Dark, for example, how you build a monster and how you check it is so simple. There's a step-by-step process. You follow that, it's easy enough. It is going to be much harder for older versions of the game to create stat blocks for them, because quite often they build a monster, but they're not built in such a way that, okay, I'm building it to be a high-level monster, a low-level monster. There's no monster level or challenge rating for older versions of AD&D. They don't really work that way. And some systems just don't operate that way at all. Okay, so you don't need to worry about that sort of stuff. You can use ChatGPT to help you build up your stat block if you want. It's been exposed to a lot of material, so it could probably do some of it, but it's probably no good at checking. Checking is done by playtesting. You actually have to use the monster and test it. And there's no point testing a monster that you have made with people who are new to the game or have a very basic understanding of the mathematics of the game. You need to find, I hate to say it, power gamers. Chuck a whole bunch of power gamers together who are really knowledgeable in the system you're playing and get them to test out those monsters, and then you'll know. It is no good using people who are fairly average in terms of skill or new to the game. That's not playtesting. That's wasting your time. And that's not a reflection on people who are new to a system. That is a reflection on, if you're going to test a racing car, You get a racing driver, a professional racing driver, a test driver. You do not pull somebody off the street who likes driving around in cars. That's not the way you test a car. Okay? All right. Miscellaneous recommendations. I always like to give out a few, and these are the ones that I think are most important. The monster will always feel unfinished. So don't let the perfectionist side of you stop you completing the monster. I am unfortunately a perfectionist, but I have identified that I am, and so I have to deliberately force myself to say, stop it. It's actually really difficult to do, but you do need to make sure that you decide there is a point where it's good enough. Yep. It's easy to get fixated on the stat block for building a monster because often you're thinking, well, if I'm making a monster, the only thing I really need to worry about is if it gets into combat. But what happens if you have a monster that's its whole interaction is around a story and you have no narrative? It's much harder to deal with incorporating a monster in a story or an adventure if there's no narrative. It is much easier to do it when there is. Stat blocks are stat blocks. Quite often, if you need a stat block and it's too hard to do, you can just reskin something that's close enough. You know, the narrative of your monster is is definitely the most important aspect. Avoid judging the value and quality of your monster. I think this is probably really important for those of you who are not publishing. If you are publishing, of course, that's going to feel a bit different. But if you aren't publishing and you're just making it for yourself and your group, it's really unimportant what you think or somebody else thinks in terms of the value or quality of the monster. The only importance is, did you find it easy enough to run, and did you like it? And did your players have a good time dealing with the monster? Whether it was to bribe the monster, eat the monster, kill the monster, or make it friends. It really, that's the only thing that was really that important, because you're not likely to be selling this on the open market. So yeah, I just wanted to point those things out. I think those are important things to understand. And I make a lot of monsters, as people might be aware, and I have a lot of tools for making your own monsters. And I don't mean the mathematics, I mean the narrative, the really hard stuff. Usually most game systems have a tool for doing that. So yes, all the best with your monster creation. I'm sure you will do well. And hey, till next time, thanks for watching and listening, by the way. And thank you to all my patrons who support me. But yeah, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, all right. Now, I would normally throw in a lot of different links. I don't know if I can necessarily get all the links that I need to in here. But I will give you a link to my Discord to start off with, for those of you who are interested. Normally, people are used to me building a monster or building tools for a monster after this. And the reason I'm not doing this is because it's summer in New Zealand and I just cook in this room, and I don't really appreciate killing myself over the whole process. So I'm going to probably be on Discord very shortly. So you are welcome to come and hang out on Discord. It's not for just patrons, it's for anybody who wants it. So that's not really an issue. And the other thing is, I think what I'll do is, now all the tools that you could possibly imagine for building your own monsters, big huge tables, are on Patreon. They're there. You could download them. This whole program that I've just talked about, it's on there as well. Now get rid of this hat. Okay, free myself up a little bit. So let me at least provide you with a link to some of these different resources that I think you will find useful, because I did talk about a bunch of stuff, but I'm not going to provide you links to the likes of artificial intelligence, because you guys can sort that out. You don't really need me, but I can provide you a link to various tools that allow you to make stuff, and hopefully you'll find them useful. And there's a couple of them here that I think you might be able to use. So I'll drop them in. So this is the 5e Tools Calculator. Again, I'm going to warn you against thinking that this is going to be a perfect solution. It is not. It is definitely not a perfect solution. Okay. Another one is the Monster Shuffler. So I'll grab the Monster Shuffler and copy this. And if you're dealing with Starfinder, most of these are sort of for 5e, but this is for Starfinder. Starfinder has a monster builder as well. And I think this is this Starfinder? God, I hope it is. That's Pathfinder, that's something else. Terra Stop Block. Oh, this is Pathfinder. I need to find Starfinder though. Copy, and I'll drop this in. Lets you get, this is Pathfinder 2e, for those of you who are into 2e. Now, I'm giving you tools for the mathematics sides of things. Are there tools out there that other people have made for making the narrative of a monster? There are, but they're very, very hard to get, and they usually involve a cost. So I can't really provide them for free to you because they just don't exist. But when it comes to just building the mathematics of your monster, there's a lot of people doing those sorts of things. That's easy to come up with. It's much harder to come up with a narrative, so I don't think a lot of people have considered making sure that there are tools for doing that as well. Not on a free website. And I think this is, I just gave you a couple of different things, and this is, I think this is Starfinder here. This is the Starfinder one. Hello Twilight, how are you? Hello Pale Rider, and I'm just going to drop this in. Fred Huber, Pale Rider, thanks for showing up. AD&D challenge was the hit dice, the number of hit dice. Nothing else was really considered. Yes, that's true. And that was an easy way to sort of look at it. But, even that didn't really mean very much, because special abilities on monsters could really make them quite strong, even in AD&D. Fun fact for today. The deadliest, highest kill percentage is the tiny Blackfoot cat. I don't know what we're talking about, Pale Rider, but okay. I like tweaking how monsters All right. Yes, tweak away. So, Twilight, you've said a couple of things here, and I will get to them. I just want to make sure I've dropped all of the tools that I should be dropping in here. Oh, this might be useful too. I'd forgotten about this one. This is like an odd thing, but so AJ Pickett did actually try to make a tool with somebody else that allows you to kind of create different stuff, and yeah, you might find that of some use. I think that's in there. I hope so. I think I had the link, but I can't remember. There we go. And I think those are all the tools that I have. Everything else, they're just... Oh! Here is a step-by-step, 5-step approach for making monsters for an RPG. I can give you this link as well. And that is probably all the resources that I can squeeze into chat for today. All right, back to Twilight Garden's presentation. I like for a monster to be its motivations. Yes, motivation for anything is really important. What is it motivated by? Is it just motivated to kill and feed? That is fine, but make sure you know this. Okay, give them social disorders that directs their aberrant behavior and maybe exploit. Yep. Dragons have greed. Some dragons do. Arrogance. Beholder's paranoia. Yeah, look. Putting some sort of psychological disorder on a monster can certainly make it scary. Absolutely. I'm still a caveman in many ways. You don't use it? Well, I just wanted to make sure that people had an opportunity to come and hang out with me and talk about monsters and so forth. Will I get back to making monster tools? Yes, I absolutely will. It's just about making sure that my brain is in a good environment to do so, and the middle of summer is just not going to work. And we're sort of in spring, summer here in New Zealand. It gets too hot, so I don't sort of function very well. So let's just see what we've got here in terms of votes. We've only got 5 votes. It's pretty quiet today. Do you struggle making scary monsters for your tabletop role-playing games? No. 60%, just watching 40%, and that's out of 5 votes. So clearly everybody here knows exactly what they're doing. they're not requiring my assistance at all, which is fine. That's all right. That's cool. Yeah. So I'm going to be over on Discord, just working through a couple of different things, I keep adding to the list of tools that people would like us to make on the channel, and I just haven't been given anything that I thought was important enough to actually turn into a tool. And there have been some suggestions. Ultimately, I just haven't seen them as being important enough to worry about. You know, things around internal organs and external organs and monster color. Like I don't think that needs to be a tool that we make. I think that DMs can figure that out. Game masters can understand that. Innate spellcasting abilities. Like it just basically just means that's any spell that there is. There's no point in doing anything with that. And then legendary actions are really just an extension of special abilities, monster special abilities. So I don't think that needs to be something we concern ourselves with. If somebody ever comes up with a tool that I think we need to make, then I will make it. But I just don't think we have got there yet. Anyway, that's everything I have to say for today. Huge thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. Thank you to all of my patrons. Thanks for taking part in the poll if you did. Huge thank you to Twilight Gardens. I appreciate you being here. Pale Rider for your comments, and Fred Huber, who is a patron. I really do appreciate your feedback and at least talking to me so I don't feel like I'm alone. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your